Hey everyone, welcome back to Economic Binoculars. On April 2nd, also known as Liberation Day, Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs sent shockwaves through the global economy. One country in particular reacted instantly, screaming, "What the fuck?" and reaching out to the Trump administration within 24 hours. So why did Vietnam concede so quickly? Buckle up and get your Vietnamese egg coffee ready as we explore the complexity of Vietnam's economic landscape, the pressures it faced, and the strategic decisions that led to its swift concessions. In this video, we will dive into 1. Vietnam's economic landscape, 2. The trade war and Vietnam's swift response, 3. The aftermath and strategic implications. Vietnam, a country nestled along the eastern edge of the Indochinese Peninsula, has quietly transformed itself into one of Southeast Asia's most dynamic economies. With a population of over 100 million people and a land area of around 331,000 square kilometers, its capital, Hanoi, stands as both a political center and a symbol of its resilience. After the devastating Vietnam War, the country's economy was essentially starting from scratch. But in 1986, everything began to change. Vietnam introduced a sweeping set of economic reforms known as Doi Moi, shifting from a centrally planned economy to a market-oriented one. The doors opened to foreign investment, and companies like Nike, Adidas, Uniqlo, and countless global textile brands rushed in to set up manufacturing bases. Over the decades, Vietnam evolved into a key global hub for apparel and footwear production. Its GDP hit nearly $430 billion in 2024, and more impressively, its GDP per capita has surged from under $300 in the early 1990s to over $4,600 today. That's one of the fastest rises in the region, basically going from post-war poverty to middle-income status in just a few decades. Now, let's start by painting a picture of Vietnam's economy. Imagine a bustling marketplace where nearly every stall is exporting goods to the world. That's Vietnam for you. In 2024, Vietnam's gross domestic product, GDP, was estimated at $476.3 billion US. Vietnam's total export value was a whopping $405.5 billion, accounting for approximately 85% of the country's GDP. Now, that's what I call putting all your eggs in the export basket. But wait, it gets more interesting. Nearly a third of these exports, about $137 billion, were destined for the United States, making Uncle Sam Vietnam's largest export market. To put it in perspective, that's like selling a third of your lemonade stand's lemonade to one particularly thirsty neighbor. If that neighbor suddenly decides to go on a diet, you're in trouble. This heavy reliance on exports, especially to the US, made Vietnam's economy particularly vulnerable to any trade disruptions. It's like building a sandcastle right at the water's edge. Looks great until the tide comes in. In early 2025, the US administration, aiming to rectify what it perceived as unfair trade practices, announced a series of tariffs on multiple countries. President Trump made it clear in his speech to the Congress.
Second, reciprocal tariffs kick in, and whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth.
Vietnam found itself in the crosshairs with a proposed 46% tariff on its exports to the US. That's like your best customer suddenly demanding a 46% discount. Ouch. The immediate implications were daunting. Analysts warned that these tariffs could slash Vietnam's GDP growth by up to 3 percentage points, jeopardizing the nation's ambitious 8% growth target for the year. It's akin to training for a marathon and then being told you'll have to run it with a backpack full of bricks. Recognizing the potential economic fallout, Vietnam didn't waste any time.
Vietnam on the tariff, saying that this man told him that Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to zero if they are able to make an agreement with the U.S. Trump says that he replied by thanking him on behalf of the U.S. and saying he looked forward to a meeting in the near future. So no definite moves happening there, but it does show that the president is...
The government initiated high-level diplomatic engagements, with Deputy Prime Minister Bui Tan-son meeting U.S. Ambassador Mark Knapper to request a delay in the tariff implementation. It's like asking for a rain check before the storm hits. Additionally, Vietnam proposed significant concessions, including reducing tariffs on U.S. goods to zero, aiming to foster better trade relations. Imagine telling your grumpy neighbor, "Hey, I'll mow your lawn for free if you keep buying my lemonade." Desperate times call for desperate measures. So, what happened next? Here's the update. On April 9th, 2025, Trump pulled a surprising move. It slashed tariffs to 10% across the board, including Vietnam, from a punishing 46% all the way down to 10% as well. Sounds like a win for Vietnam, right? Well, not exactly. This wasn't a goodwill gesture. It was a chess move. The US wasn't ending the trade war, it was just repositioning its pieces on the board. And Vietnam, rather than risking a full-on economic brawl, decided to fold its cards early and cooperate. Let's be real. Vietnam isn't the intended enemy here. It's China. It is always China. Over the past few years, as the US ramped up tariffs on Chinese goods, Chinese manufacturers got creative. They rerouted exports through third countries like Vietnam, relabeling goods to dodge US tariffs. Everything from solar panels and steel to furniture, electronics, and apparel made their way into the US market through Vietnam. The US government wasn't buying it, literally or figuratively. In fact, reports from the Office of the United States Trade Representative, USTR, flagged Vietnam multiple times for acting as a pass-through hub for Chinese overproduction. The goods may have had a Made in Vietnam sticker, but their true origin was China. But here's where it gets strategic. By slashing tariffs to 10% in April, the US essentially said, "You want to keep trading with us? Fine, but stop being China's export playground." US can always put 46% tariffs back in play, but Vietnam, they don't really have the cards. Vietnam, realizing the risks of being caught in the crossfire, conceded quickly. After all, the US is its largest single export market. It couldn't afford a prolonged trade fight, especially not one that wasn't really its own. So instead of doubling down, Vietnam is now working overtime to prove its supply chains are clean and its production is legit. Meanwhile, the US is going door to door across Asia, having quiet conversations with trade partners, India, Mexico, Thailand, Indonesia, urging them not to let China sneak through the back door of their economies either. This isn't a random tariff tantrum. It's a global containment strategy. So in the end, Vietnam didn't fold because it was weak. It folded because it's smart. In this giant trade chessboard, it knew better than to block the Queen's path. Do you think the US is being fair by targeting countries like Vietnam in its strategy against China? Or is it just playing hardball in global economics? Should Vietnam continue strengthening its trade ties with the US? Is this the beginning of a new kind of trade war? Less about tariffs, more about influence and alliances? What do you think comes next? Leave your comments below. Let's get the conversation going. If you found this deep dive into Vietnam's trade dynamics enlightening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content. I'll see you in the next episode of Economic Binoculars.